Alice Rawsthorn, welcome to DHAB and thanks for joining us in the beginning of the new year of Elisava Talks. For more than 20 years you have been thinking, you have been writing, you have been speaking about design, and I think that the evolution of design as a term, as a notion, as a space has been very big in those periods. So I would say, like, at the end of 2023, what would be your definition of design today and what it stands for?
Well, as you say, design is a complex and elusive phenomenon. It's meant many different things at different times and in different contexts. But for me, it has always had one elemental role, and that's as an agent of change that can ensure that changes of any type, cultural, scientific, technological, economic, political, social, ecological, whatever, are interpreted in ways that will affect us positively rather than negatively.
I think we're also in a moment where we want to tell new stories about design, and we want to retell and rewrite in many ways design history. We have just opened a show on the impact of women on design in the 20th century. You have written extensively also about how we are unraveling and discovering new stories of design. Do you think that also we need to tell again, we need to rewrite, we need to always revisit what are the histories that we have received from what design is and has been?
Absolutely, and this doesn't just apply to design, it applies to every area of visual culture, which traditionally has been written, conceived and delivered by white cis males in the global north. Of course, it's a much broader story than that, particularly for design, which of course, design was practiced instinctively and unknowingly long before a word was invented to describe it, and all genders participated in that. So it's absolutely essential that we continue the good work it's absolutely essential that we continue the good work that obviously you're part of here in revisiting the gender politics of design and exploring the work of the extraordinary women designers who were overlooked for so long. But it's equally important that those efforts are extended so that non-binary designers are included. This is an increasingly important area of design which has a very interesting role in design history. And obviously that we take a more diverse and inclusive view of design and the people who practice it in terms of ethnicity, geography and heritage.
Two of your most recent books, Designer's Attitude and Design Emergency, along with Paolo Antonelli, I think have been very important documents to narrate in a way the transition and the possibility and the opportunity that design is playing today in a moment of constant crisis, what some have called the perma-crisis, this overlap series of crises from the environmental to the social to inequality, to many other functions. What is it like, you think, being a practitioner of design in this moment, in this transitional moment in time? And what is the possibility of design to face and to help to shape this kind of wide, complex, overlapping series of challenges that we're facing as societies today?
Well, it's a grave responsibility that no designer should embark upon without utmost serious diligence and precision and sensitivity. But design has always flourished as a medium at times of extreme and intense change, and we are definitely living through one of those periods. It's a tragic and terrible period in many respects. It's also one of many new possibilities and opportunities. And designers should, in theory, be absolutely central in the process of navigating all of those changes, identifying the threats and ensuring that we can ameliorate their impact, and identifying the opportunities and ensuring that we can make the most of them. And so this is an exciting and exhilarating and very promising period for designers, and also a time when the rest of society will be more open to design. In many areas of practice, like the social sciences, for example, there's a general acceptance that 20th century methodologies are no longer fit for purpose. And so perhaps an increased willingness to experiment with new tools, including design. So this is both an urgent period for design where we all desperately need it to fulfill its role as an agent of change as responsibly and effectively as possible, and yet also a very stressful and it's stretching and demanding one, because just as the possibilities of success are hugely promising, the implications of failure are horrific.
On this note, a very fast one, actually. In this possibility of design being an agent to shape a better future, what do you think is the possibility? What do you think is the responsibility? And what do you think are the limitations that designers are facing today?
Well, designers have greater opportunities than ever before. For centuries during the industrial age, design tended to be limited to the role of being a styling and promotional tool, something that was concerned with surface appearance rather than substance, and something executed under instruction from other people. Design has been transformed by digital technology because very familiar, basic, not necessarily expensive technologies have liberated designers to work independently and to pursue their own social, economic, political and ecological causes. So it's absolutely up to designers to define their way of working, their ambitions and the limitations of their practices. The stakes are very high, as they should be. If designers are going to be tackling these complex intersectional challenges that will be so fundamental to our future, they have to do so with the utmost integrity, responsibility and seriousness. Just as every success will help the cause of attitudinal design to move forward, every failure will be a major setback.
Can you think about one design project that exemplifies or that gives you hope in our capacity to produce transformative change and changes on the scales as we need today?
Well, this is an incredible period for design where designers of all generations, all methodologies, all disciplines, all geographies are really seizing their chance to shape a better future in different ways. One of my favourite projects is what I call an epic design endeavour, and that's the Great Green Wall of Africa. This is this mammoth strategic design exercise to try and regenerate what was once agricultural land and is now, thanks to years of prolonged droughts, desert, on an 8,000 kilometre strip of land across the southern edge of the Sahara Desert, from Senegal on the west coast of Africa to Djibouti on the east coast. It began in 2008, and 2 years ago it was 20% completed. It's a Pan-African project run under the aegis of the African Union, but with international funding from the World Bank, the United Nations, national governments and so on. A year ago, it was given an additional 19.5 billion US dollars by a group of funders led by the French government and the World Bank. This gives it a fighting chance of completion and of achieving its goal of creating 10 million new green jobs across this region, which is absolutely on the precipice of the climate emergency, with all the social and political problems that the climate emergency has caused, as well as the environmental problems. If it succeeds, it would transform a huge swathe of one of the most precarious and vulnerable and threatened and imperiled areas of our planet.
I'm quite fascinated by the use that you make of Instagram and of your Instagram account, because a medium that everybody thinks that is instantaneous and a bit shallow and maybe a bit banal, you have really turned it into an incredible channel, both for expanding and rewriting narratives about design, but also being incredibly far-reaching and accessible in including people into understanding what is the impact of design in the world. Sometimes when I am reading your posts, I feel like I almost have the chance to go to the Rawsthorn School of Design, which is really fascinating. How did you bump into it? What did you want to do with it?
Well, initially I was resistant to going on Instagram for the reasons that you've alluded to. It was seen as showy, stylistic and very short-termist and so on. But a friend, the curator, Hans-Ulrich Obrist, bullied me in the nicest possible way to go on Instagram, saying he really thought I could do something interesting with it. So I decided I would approach it as a project, and in all my writing for the New York Times and everything else, my principal aim has always been to try and persuade other people to see design as I see it, as this eclectic, diverse, an empowering and inclusive agent of change that can change our lives for the better rather than changing them for the worse. So I decided that every week I would pick a theme on Instagram, and every day I would post about a different design iteration of it, which would immediately show the many different perspectives that design could bring, whether it was to the climate emergency, the refugee crisis, the colour blue, if there's a massive global event like the Russian invasion of Ukraine or the terrible earthquake in northern Syria and southern Turkey, I would post about the design responses to them. And so in many respects it's very selfish and self-indulgent, because that's what I love doing. One of the reasons I love writing about design is it enables me to investigate everything as a ubiquitous force. There's a design perspective to absolutely everything we do and everything that happens. But I felt that would be an accessible way to illustrate to other people the diversity and the impact of design. And I've just been incredibly lucky that people have interpreted it in that way. So it's hugely enjoyable for me. And when it's no longer enjoyable, I will stop doing it, but that moment hasn't come yet.
Last question. We are at DIHAB, we are at Barcelona Center for Design and Architecture. When people think about museums in general and design museums, they still, I think about preserving heritage, preserving memory, writing a history. What do you think is the possibilities and the opportunities that design institutions and that institutions in a wider sense can play today to shape and to have an impact and to contribute to the impact of design in the world?
Well, again, the possibilities are absolutely endless. It's up to the individual institutions to decide how they want to interpret design and in what way. I mean, design culture in general has never been more dynamic, more exciting, more dialectic. And so it's very important that cultural institutions like design museums mirror that. And so you currently have an exhibition about women in design who perhaps have been overlooked over the decades. That sort of work is incredibly important if we're going to have a more diverse and inclusive design culture. It would be great to think that you would extend that into a broader vision of gender politics by addressing non-binary, trans and queer issues, and all the other impediments to making design as dynamic, as relevant and as resonant as it needs to be.
Alice Rawsthorn, moltes gràcies. Thank you so much.
Muchas gracias. Yes.